It's my nerd world and a Star Wars show. On this week's episode, Adam Driver, out doing promotion for his new film, talks about what was supposed to be the arc for Kylo Ren instead of what we got in the sequel trilogy. We also have a Mando Season 4 update. Is it going to be a Season 4, or is it going to be a movie on the big screen? And, of course, your listener feedback.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
It is my nerd world, and welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, here to talk about all things a galaxy far, far away during the holiday season, and I hope you are having a fantastic holiday so far. Programming note, not sure what the schedule is for the end of the year. I anticipate to get at least one more show in, probably after Christmas. I'm going on vacation next week before the new year, so that's my intention. So we'll see what plays out between now and then. The news is obviously going to be slowing down even more so than it has because of the strikes that have been taking place in Hollywood, but I do anticipate at least one more show before we get to the end of 2023 and kick off 2024. So let's go ahead and get started with some of the rumor news before we dive into some interesting comments from Adam Driver, as he's been out promoting his upcoming film, Ferrari.
This is not going to go the way you think.
Truth of the matter is, we don't really know how this is going to go. Bespin Bulletin and Making Star Wars have been reporting this week that there's been some rumors flying around from other outlets that The Mandalorian Season 4 could be crafted into a film potentially to release before this Charmin Obey-Shenoid Daisy Ridley post The Rise of Skywalker film. However, both Bespin Bulletin and Jason Ward at Making Star Wars have been talking to their sources, and from what they're hearing, Mandalorian Season 4 is still going to be a Disney Plus show, and filming potentially will begin in February of next year. It had been in talks of being a movie. At the moment, the next movie isn't slated. It's unofficially slated at the moment for 2026. That still seems awfully far out. I know that we're supposed to be going into production on the Daisy Ridley 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker film sometime in the first part of next year. But to wait all the way until 2026 just seems like an awfully far date, even for a film that would begin, being filmed next year. I'd have to imagine that some pre-production work has already begun, but hopefully we'll get something more substantial. There has still been talk that before the end of the year, we could potentially go and we could potentially receive some news that has been waiting in the wings because of the strikes going on, according to Jeff Snyder on the Hot Mic podcast. And so we'll see what the next 2 weeks end up revealing. But at the moment, it looks as if Mandalorian Season 4 is a go, possibly to begin filming next year. Also, more talk with Ahsoka, and then Ahsoka Season 2 is potentially a go as well. They've been releasing on Star Wars some of the behind-the-scenes footage for Ahsoka, and hopefully we'll get the full documentary, the Disney Gallery for Ahsoka, soon, because I certainly want to see that, as I've continued to mention of just how much I personally enjoy that series.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
So Adam Driver is talking about his portrayal of Kylo Ren. and specifically how Ben Solo's redemption was planned, and it was never a part of it. Now, what's interesting about this interview is that it clears up something that I remember hearing early on with regard to Kylo Ren. And that is that J.J. Abrams had initially planned for Kylo Ren to be the opposite of Anakin Skywalker. I'd been confused by that comment for a long time, meaning how Vader started off evil and bad and then was redeemed at the end, and Kylo was going to go through the reverse of that. I'll tell you what I was confused about and why Adam Driver's comments ended up clarifying this for me. However, let me go ahead and give you what he had to say. Adam Driver recently stopped by the Rich Eisen show, and in it he talked about Kylo Ren's arc throughout the sequel trilogy and how it kept changing with time. Driver is currently out promoting Ferrari and said the following when asked if he knew that he was playing Vader 2.0. He says, "I did, yeah, and I had an overall arc that in mind that J.J. Abrams wanted to do. His idea was that Kylo's journey was the opposite journey of Vader, where Vader starts the most confident and the most committed to the dark side, and then in the last movie, he's the most vulnerable and weak. He wanted to start with the opposite. The character was the most confused and vulnerable, and by the end of the 3 movies, he would be the most committed to the dark side. I kept that arc in mind, regardless if that wound up not being the journey anyways, because it changed while shooting, but I was still focused on that." Now, Eisen asked when the character's arc changed, and Driver said the following. With Ryan, he took it in a different direction, but it still tracked with the character, and then in the last one, it changed into being, about them and the dyad and things like that, and evolving into Ben Solo. That was never part of it. He was Ben Solo from the beginning, but there was never a version where we'd see Ben Solo when I first signed up for it. Now, the article here goes on to say, Driver's comments are not really all that surprising, though they are worth listening to because of how thoughtful he is about everything he does. Driver was first approached to play the main villain in the sequels at the end of 2013 and the start of 2014. At the time, J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan had been rewriting Michael Arndt's script for Episode 7 for a few months. But the studio had scrapped Arndt's overall treatment for the sequel trilogy. In an effort to meet the 2015 release date Disney had set for him, they decided to take it one film at a time and let Rian Johnson figure out what to do with Episode 8 on his own. Colin Trevorrow was signed later to do Episode 9, back when there wasn't a fully laid out plan, but there were certainly seeds of one. The Duel of the Fates script that leaked into the internet after The Rise of Skywalker came out did not feature Ben Solo at all, and by the time The Last Jedi wrapped filming in 2016, that was the plan for the trilogy, for Kylo Ren to go further down the dark side path. Lucasfilm later changed their mind, and they did so even before Rian Johnson's movie came out. Trevorrow was let go, and J.J. Abrams took over Episodes 9, co-writing with Chris Terrio. So yes, this is even more confirmation that there was a lot of turmoil making the sequel trilogy, and the actors that suffered from it, first and foremost, John Boyega is an example of this. The article goes on to say, and I'm going to stop here because I don't ever agree with those comments about John Boyega and him being done wrong. He had a fantastic role in The Last Jedi and certainly had one in The Rise of Skywalker as well. I'll add on here something that I've said a bunch on the podcast before, and that is the original trilogy changed. I mean, the whole concept of what was supposed to happen with Luke potentially fully going to the dark side before coming back, Leia being his sister wasn't initially the plan. All of these things changed. It seems pretty clear to me as an observer, having followed all this stuff all these years, it seems to me that Disney and Lucasfilm specifically, began to recognize the Reylo aspect of what was going on and the importance of those two characters together, and that this was a better route to go. Personally, I think that it was. I would have been interested in seeing J.J. Abrams' original vision come to fruition. And what I always got tripped up with that comment, because this is nothing new. We heard about this early on. J.J. Abrams mentioned that he wanted Kylo Ren to be the opposite of Vader. I was always factoring in the prequels. And that's where the comment never landed right with me. I was always looking at it from a prequel standpoint. thinking, well, Anakin was good and then turned bad and got really bad and then came back to being good. They were looking at it strictly from an original trilogy standpoint of when you first meet Vader being totally committed to the dark side and then coming back to the light at the end. Whereas Ben Solo would have started off somewhat conflicted at the beginning. And you saw that briefly in that shot in The Force Awakens of him with the helmet, seeing the pull to the light, and then he gets committed further by going and killing Han Solo. I like what they did with the sequel trilogy. I love all three of those films. I love The Rise of Skywalker. I'm glad the way it turned out, but I also understand what could have happened if it gone the other way, but that's not the story that was told, and that's not what's in canon now. But that's where I always got tripped up. I never understood that reverse Vader thing because I was always thinking Anakin, not when we're just first introduced to Darth Vader. But what do you think? TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Stephen Cross writes in, great show as always. Thank you, Stephen. It's hard to believe it's been 4 years since The Rise of Skywalker was released. It would be amazing if the Rey movie was the first slate of films to be released before Dave Filoni puts out his movies. I feel like Star Wars fans ought to know what happened after the Battle of Exegol and the 15 years in between, so I'm hoping they dig into that in the Rey movie or in future sequel trilogy content. Star Wars has been a big part of my life and has always brought me tons of enjoyment to the point where I am now writing Star Wars fan fiction. Good for you! And plan on writing several more stories in the future. Absolutely love the comment you put on here on YouTube. Thank you, Stephen. It really means a lot to me. And good luck in your writings, and I hope you check out my science fiction space opera series. But again, thank you so much for writing in. Friend of the show, Howard Kemple. Long time since I've heard from Howard, but really glad to hear from him again. Wanted to talk about Sabine. I'm finally writing now, so I'll get into it. I was originally of the thought that Sabine didn't have any Force powers. It's not that I didn't want her to be gifted in the Force, but everything seemed to lean to her not being gifted. I felt reinforced by this when she was fighting Shin Hati in Episode 4 when she attempted to Force push Shin. I saw it as Shin flinching, expecting a Force attack by Sabine. Hence why she said, "You have no power." I watched it several times, and now, of course, I was pleasantly disappointed when Sabine's power became more pronounced towards the finale. Like I said, I wasn't against her being gifted in the Force. Yeah, I know a lot of people had a hard time with that. I personally did it. I thought the way that they executed all of that was very well done. I certainly respect the argument that she got her Force powers sort of too quickly. But when you, at least for me, when I consider the big move that she made in pushing Ezra off of the monument and onto the Star Destroyer, I kind of saw that as part Ezra and part Sabine. Plus, being under that duress, I took it as she could go ahead and make those moves. But when you go and consider Luke Skywalker, I mean, he, in that moment, having not really receiving any training, was able to go and Force pull the lightsaber from the snow in The Empire Strikes Back. So it's not like we haven't seen somebody come into their powers quickly before. For now, I sit quietly and wait for some Star Wars cinema content. Like you, it's been a long, fun ride since the 4-year-old in me sat in the theater with my dad back in '77, getting Obi-Wan and R2-D2 as my first action figures when they came out, because that was all that was available at the local Kmart, and wearing out those pirated VHS copies of the original trilogy. You might as well be telling my story of my youth there, Howard. In the meantime, I will wait and continue to rewatch what's out now and collect my Star Wars Lego sets. My wife and kids are too kind to me by helping me hunt down certain sets. I think I know what I'm getting for Christmas. But for now, thank you for your podcast. It has helped me listening to someone else my age who enjoys Star Wars and Depeche Mode as much, if not more, than me. Please keep it up. Merry Christmas to you, your family, and your many friends of the show, and may the Force be with you. Very respectfully, Howard. Thank you, Howard. It's really great to hear from you, and continue prayers to you and your family as well. Lastly, let's hear from Ray 2017, who says, I don't want anything to be rushed at this point in time. I will wait and wait for quality in terms of the movies and in terms of everything else. As for the Acolyte and the Skeleton Crew, if this is all we're going to get for the time being, then you know what? I don't care if I have to wait till the middle of next year. I would, however, like to hear some kind of confirmation about a second season of Ahsoka. That would be nice to have. It would feel like a Christmas present. I want this next movie to be better than the sequel trilogy. I want Dave Filoni to take his time as he needs his movie because I want it to be good. Waiting for the quality for me is more important than rushing to get as much content as possible. I'm willing to wait for Acolyte. If we have to wait till May 4th, that would be really great. That would be fantastic as long as it ends up being worth it in the end. The end results, that is what's worth it. Going ahead and into the end of this year and going into the new year, I'm going to set my expectations low and let it surprise me. Ray 2017, as always, thank you for the listener feedback this week. I do appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for checking out this week's episode. I know I'm keeping it short, but there wasn't a lot to cover. And again, I hope that I'll have another episode before the end of the year. Maybe we'll have some news to talk about. For those who've been listening to the show for a while, thank you so much for doing so. I'm going to talk a bit about my book. So if you've heard this spiel before, I hope you're doing well, and I'll talk to you again really soon. If you are a newer listener to the show and you want to support my nerd world, or you just haven't pulled the trigger yet, I hope you'll take a moment and check out my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. There are 7 books available in the series. I wrote it because of my love of Star Wars, and I wanted to know what it was like for George Lucas to create his, my own universe. I ended up writing the first book, EMBARK. I'll tell you the background on that story here in just a moment, but that turned into a 7-story arc. An original trilogy, books 1, 2, and 3. Book 4 is a solo adventure that still continues the story while getting you set up for the second trilogy of 5, 6, and 7. They're available in ebook, audiobook, paperback, and hardcover. You can also read them for free on Kindle Unlimited. Katha lost her father 1 year ago. Yesterday, he gave her the key to saving humanity. She just doesn't know it yet. All starfighter pilot Taft Guardia wanted was to train with Katha Morrow and one day travel to distant worlds. He'll need the skills to survive when an industrial accident inside a D-Corp spacecraft factory sets off a catastrophic chain of events. As the ruthless Sin Argum of D-Corp attempts to exploit the disaster, a cryptic message from Katha's late aerospace engineer father leads to what may be the only hope of stopping him. With their fates intertwined, Taft and Katha must confront the past as they fight for humanity's future among the stars. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction. Written for adults, but great for ages 11 plus. 7 books in all in the series, and you can purchase paperbacks and hardcovers directly from me. All you got to do is email talkshownerd@gmail.com. I'll autograph them for free. I usually get them in the mail within a few days. You could even get them before Christmas, I think, if you got your order in soon enough. So if you like your science fiction space opera to be epic, filled with romance and action, EMBARK is perfect for you. Go to Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK, or head on over to mynerdworld.net. I hope wherever you are, you're having a wonderful holiday season and that you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. And I'll talk to you one more time before the new year. If I don't talk to you before the 25th, Merry Christmas to you, and thank you so much for devoting some of your precious time to my musings about Star Wars. Until then, I hope you're doing well, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.